Hi everyone, this is student forecaster Stephen Boyle. Happy Saturday evening, everybody. Um, I am student forecaster for Northeast Weather Center, which is soon to become the United States Weather Center. Um, well, actually, it's actual. I'm gonna unofficially change the name of the of the of the page. Unfortunately, I won't be able to actually change the name of the page because once you have over 200 viewers on the page, you can't change the name. So it's actually going to stay Northeast Weather Center, but we will be covering the whole country. And I'll change even the logo to show United States Weather Center. So we'll be covering the whole United States, and basically from there, we'll be able to you know get some of that. So we'll be covering the whole United States now. So here's what's going on: current watches, warnings across the country, and basically we do have a couple of watches out this evening. We do have a couple severe thunderstorm watches, one into portions of Missouri and another one into parts of Oklahoma and portions of Texas. Due to recent rains, there are some various flood warnings into portions of Mississippi, portions of Alabama, the Panhandle of Florida, southeastern Georgia, and also into parts of South Carolina. There are some also flood warnings going on and flood statements up into the northern plains. Um, some of them due to snow melt, some of them due to some recent rains that we've seen up into these sections, but for the most part due to snow melt and recent warming temperatures. Here's a current radar imagery, and you can see these very nasty, vicious thunderstorms that are popping up into portions of Missouri, central Oklahoma, and also central Texas. These are very nasty storms producing large hail, damage, and winds. So if you are in the track for any of these storms, you want to be very careful and make sure that, whoops, didn't mean to do that. You want to be very careful if you live in the track of any of these storms because they could do some pretty interesting damage. And here we go. Here is the shield of rain that will actually be moving on up into the northeast tomorrow evening. You can see some of these rains are even pretty torrential, particularly into parts of Illinois, Kentucky, starting to enter into portions of Indiana. These are pretty intense rains, but we also have some rain going on down into portions of Alabama, portions of Georgia, and also into parts of Mississippi. Some of the embedded in here, we do have some very heavy rain, but for the most part, it's a moderate rain into these regions. Working our way up north into portions of Wisconsin and portions of Michigan, we do have some rain, maybe even a little bit of snowflakes mixing in into some areas. But for the most part, it's a rain situation for most of us. We also have some rainfall going on into portions of Nebraska, going on into portions of Kansas, Colorado. We also have some rain and maybe a few snowflakes mixing in into portions of South Dakota and also into portions of North Dakota. Tonight it's pretty clear and pretty calm into the northeast after a very nice day. I mean, we had temperatures in some locations reaching into the mid 60s. A lot of people in New England reached into the 50s and mid 50s. But for the most part, it was a very beautiful day out there, and hope you all enjoyed it. All right, looking at the satellite imagery, here's what's going on here. You can see there's those thunderstorms that are popping up into portions of Texas and into portions of Missouri and Oklahoma and starting to enter into portions of Arkansas. We're also talking about a little bit of, there is the shield of clouds associated with the rains that are down into portions of the South and the Midwest. We also have this storm that's off into the Pacific. What's going to happen with this particular storm is this is going to kind of barrel itself down into the Gulf of Mexico, and it's most likely going to miss New England and the northern portions of the mid-Atlantic. These guys will probably be escaped from this storm. However, southern portions of the mid-Atlantic, particularly southern Jersey, southern PA, West Virginia, you may get into some rain shower activity, and especially once you get yourself into the southeast, particularly North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama, you'll most likely be talking about a good rainstorm, maybe even a few thunderstorms associated with this upper level low pressure system that's going to kind of work its way down here, and it will most likely miss the Northeast. So basically, that's what it's looking like right now. And the weekend, next weekend, looks very, very nice. It looks as if spring is really going to make a official stay here. So we get one last visit from winter, and again, it's not even the coldest air of the season, but it's cold for spring. So here comes our little system, and with this first system that's going to be moving through, that starts entering parts of the Northeast tomorrow, particularly tomorrow evening. This is going to usher in our first batch of cold air, but our main batch of cold air doesn't come in until really Monday. So basically what happens is we start getting our rain tomorrow evening, and basically overnight you really get some good steady rains into portions of New England. We get our steady rain starting in Washington, D.C., the D.C. area. You really start talking about those steady rains tomorrow afternoon. Once you go into portions of the Mid-Atlantic, it's afternoon to the evening. It starts exiting out overnight, and basically that really gets into Maine by in the morning, but it's exiting southern New England and the northern portions of the Mid-Atlantic by our evening commute on Monday. There may even be some lingering clouds with the second batch of cold air that comes in. So you have our first batch that comes in behind this little low pressure system, because here's our low, and again you have a counterclockwise flow, so basically that ushers in our first blast of colder air. But again, remember, we have a front right in here, so basically we have even stronger cold air behind that. So watch how temperatures just really drop as this front works itself in, and this really ushers in some colder air from Canada, and that's what brings in some very cold conditions for these folks in here. We're also having some very cold conditions. Looking at the northern portions of the Midwest, we have some very cold conditions. However, pretty warm conditions into the west. We have a fairly strong ridge back in here, and basically what's going on is we're getting some pretty nice and warm conditions out into these areas. But working our way back here, you can see here comes in that upper level low pressure system, and basically it brings some scattered rain showers and into the very high elevations, maybe some snows. We have some rains or maybe some thunderstorms going on into portions of the Midwest. And it's this little area of low pressure that will come down and kind of grab up some juice from the Gulf of Mexico. But you'll notice how it's going to as you'll see on some of the other models, it'll most likely miss the Northeast, because we have a very interesting, we just have a lot of this colder air, and we have a high pressure in here, and that's going to kind of block this storm from really riding up north. But for the most part, this is where our low pressure really grabs up some juice and basically exits out like this. Again, portions of Virginia could get some rain out of this. But like I said, you can definitely see that there's a well-defined trough in the east, particularly the northeast. That's really where we have a lot of our, we have a very intense trough and cooler air. So again, we're going to have some moderately cool temperatures into these regions. Looking at the GFS model now, basically here comes that little rainstorm that we get tomorrow overnight that exits out by early morning. We may get another little batch of light drizzle or rain shower activity Monday late, maybe into the afternoon and evening hours, with our second batch of cold air. And basically, in the meantime, here is our upcoming storm coming into the central portions of the west. And basically, here is the low pressure feature down in here. And what happens is this kind of rides down like this, grabs up some Gulf of Mexico moisture, but it will be pretty much riding out to sea, not affecting anybody. And there you go. All right, wow, to just look at some of these storms that are going to be offshore. I mean, if these could affect Florida with some very intense stuff here, but and even still into portions of Louisiana and also into parts of Mississippi, they could be dealing with some pretty nasty severe weather. We'll also be having to probably watching out for folks who live into Texas and folks who live into the southeast. We're going to have to really watch out for those folks down there, especially into portions right along the Gulf Coast states. That's really where we're going to, right along the Gulf Coast is where we're going to have to watch for the most volatile situation, as of course these storms will be very intense. And just look at this area of precip that's eyeing to hit Florida. Those folks there are going to be just absolutely rocked with some nasty storms. And watch how this works its way northeastward. And it does affect extreme southern portions of the mid-Atlantic. Notice how it does give portions of southern Jersey some very light rain, not anything significant, but it gives Virginia and North Carolina a little bit more significant rains, something a little bit more significant to talk about. I mean, it's only rain, and it wouldn't be really much of in the way of severe weather, maybe some scattered thunderstorms, but most of the precip is offshore. Notice how we have this, it's a really intense batch of precip. I mean, this is very intense precip. If this did come on shore, we would be talking about some possible flood and rains. But that's going to be mainly staying offshore, and that's going to be mainly riding away from most of the major cities. The only major city that might get affected is D.C., but even D.C. would get some fairly light precip. But New York, Boston, and Philly should all be spared this system. Now, after that system moves out, we start watching this ridge that starts building out in the southeast. And we start seeing a flow coming in here from the southwest into the northeast. Okay, this means warm weather, and this is now starting around Sunday. All right, so this is by next Sunday, and notice how here is our ridge right in here. Here's our area of high pressure, and this is basically bringing in warm air coming in from the south. So what does this mean for folks who live up into the north? This basically means winter is over. I don't really see much in the way of cold air. All of our cold air, winter air is now stuck up into Canada. And even if you look at this 540 line, you're saying, well, what's up with that 540 line? Don't even look at it. This time of the year, you don't really go by the 540 line. Basically, the freezing line is probably way up in here. So it's basically, you can probably call winter over, and where things are going to heat up very, very, very fast. And of course, you can see, just look at this system. You can see possibly a severe weather outbreak into the Midwestern sections of the country by the 10th of April. I mean, just look at this. Look at the system, and you can see a well-defined warm front, and you can see a well-defined cold front. I mean, you have your area of low pressure right in here, and ahead of it you got some warm air. Behind it you got some colder air coming in from Canada. So basically, and you can see the flow coming in from the Gulf. I mean, this is going to be a perfect severe weather situation for folks who live into Illinois, Missouri, into Arkansas. I mean, if this were to verify, this would definitely be something to watch for those folks. And just look at how it just explodes. I mean, this line of storms runs eventually into portions of the southeast, Alabama, folks into those regions. It kind of dies out though as it works its way into the northeast. Um, but again, I still would think we would still get at least some thunderstorms, at the very minimal. But we have a more intense line down into portions of Georgia and Alabama and South Carolina. That's where really our more intense band would be. But again, we could still see some interest in storms if this were to verify around the 12th of April for folks who live up into the northeast. Maybe a batch of cold air, but again, right again, I mean, we see warm air just impeding into most of the country, with some of your folks who live up into the northwest may be seeing some cooler conditions, but for the most part, we're watching the southeastern ridge, and basically the southeastern ridge is really going to start taking over and just ushering in some warm air from the south and giving everybody some relief from this winter. So I think it's pretty safe to say that spring is basically here. We're gonna finally look at the euro, and this is basically going to give you a sense of what's going to most likely be happening here. Here is that first system. It kind of works its way through the northeast. We get that second batch of cold air coming in. So this is just going to give us some chilly conditions, okay? But the conditions won't be that chilly. I mean, we're not going to be talking about 30s for highs. Well, some areas may reach into the mid 35 to 40 degrees, but we're not talking about 20-degree temperatures for highs, or even into the lower 30s. At coldest, we'll probably reach 30, 37, 38 degrees. And that would be mainly centered towards the Poconos, areas away from New York City, in through interior New England, up into portions of central New England. Those would be the areas that would see the coldest of the conditions. But most areas will be generally into the 40s. But still, cold conditions up into the northern plains, and you can definitely see a fairly intense ridge up into these sections of the country, very well defined. But again, this is going to be basically releasing itself next weekend. That's really when this is going to start releasing itself, and this cold air is basically going to crumble apart. You're going to see how we still see this northwesterly flow next Friday, but for the most part, we're starting to see a little bit of a flow also coming in from the southwest. So maybe these folks in here hold on to it a little bit longer, but even then, it'll be warm for those folks. And yes, there could be another blast of cold air next Saturday, but even then, it's kind of releasing itself by Sunday. So for the most part, after that though, the cold air just bounces way north, and by this time, by Tuesday the 9th, we have a very well defined southeastern ridge. I mean, really well defined. I mean, you can see this warm air coming in from the southeast and just working its way up into the northeast, or from the southwest working its way into the northeast. So basically, after that, that's when we really start talking about some very warm weather. So what we're going to do now is we're going to basically quickly look at temperatures from the GFS, surface temperatures, and from the Euro. We're not going to bother with the NAM. But here's the surface temperatures, GFS, Euro. We'll look at actually the Euros first. And then basically that'll be it for today's update. But here we go. Okay, here's what's going on. If it can kind of load up for me. All right, so here we go. So here is again our temperatures that we're experiencing here. Again, you can see most of the warm weather and actually some pretty darn warm weather going on into portions of the west. I mean, look at those 70s and 80s and even some of those 90s into portions of central California. I mean, you're talking about 70s along the coast of Oregon and Washington State. I mean, that's pretty warm for them. I mean, you're talking about the mountains of Colorado into the 30s, lower 30s. That's still pretty warm for those folks up into those regions. Again, so here's our highs tomorrow, and you can basically see, just look at this warm weather going on down into the south. I mean, look at those 80s and 90s into portions of Texas. I mean, that's some ridiculous warmth. But you can see, though, we have some 50s going on up into portions of New England and the Mid-Atlantic. 70s and 80s going on across the southeast. Here's our cold front that's starting to come in. You see those 30s and those 40s going on. So basically, this is our batch of cold air that's starting to come in. Okay, so Monday afternoon, can see our cold front. You can definitely clearly see that defined. You can see the warm air ahead of it. You can see the cold air coming in behind it. So you can see how temperatures get into the 40s, 30s and 40s, and you can see those very cold temperatures. Those won't make it down that far south, but definitely these below freezing conditions up into these areas are that's ushering some colder air. So basically, ahead of the front, we have some fairly warm conditions, and you can see during the nighttime we do reach below freezing, and then during the day we do warm up. But you can see some areas into the northeast, they may be reaching only into the 30s for highs, and even folks up into extreme northern New England, extreme northern New England may only be reaching into the 20s for highs. So that's a pretty warm. That's pretty cold, and you can see, basically, we have a fairly interesting trough being set out into this section of the country. I mean, think about it. These folks down here, I mean, that's still pretty cool for them, and it's a little bit more. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that yet again. But basically, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more defined. This is a little bit more defined, and basically all of these regions are warm. But and just notice these extreme warm temperatures down into southern Florida. But yeah, I mean, this is some very warm conditions, and you can see basically all these guys are very warm as well, but cooler into the northeastern sections of the country. The northern plains, Wisconsin, portions of Michigan, Ohio, and basically once you go south of the Ohio River Valley, you start warming things up. But we do have a little blast of cooler air into these sections of the country. But we'll have to see about that. Alright, so then we look at Wednesday the 3rd, and basically you can see still some chilly conditions going on up into those sections of the country, to these sections, northeastern sections, but the warmth is starting to work its way eastward. And by Thursday of next week, we start warming things up, especially into the northeastern sections of the country. I mean, this is where we're starting to really warm things up here. We have some mid-50s starting to work their way in here, and even some 60s. But you can see this big outbreak of 60s and 70s starting to break into the central sections of the country, and even into northern sections of New England. It's starting to warm up a little bit, but kind of chilly down here where we have that little system there. This is when where we're gonna start seeing the system affecting these folks. That's why you're kind of seeing temperatures being dropped down a little bit, is because this is where it's gonna be raining, and that's the reason why these temperatures are being kept down and why they're not going up into the 70s and 80s, is because there's no sunshine. And basically you can see as we work our way onward, you can see that we start warming things up here, and you can see cooler conditions where it's going to be raining. These folks are going to be experiencing some rain, so therefore they're going to be kind of cool. Look at some portions of Virginia are only going to be getting into the 40s, while while you go into Pennsylvania and DC and up into New England, where there's going to be some sunshine, could be nearing 60 degrees. And look at this big blast of warmth, and this big wall of warmth is aimed right towards the northeast. You got 70s and 80s and even some localized 90s. This is going to work its way eastward. And we have some 60s, low to mid 60s, and this is going to start working its way in a northeasterly direction into the northeast. And you can see as we do get a little bit of cloudiness with that approaching system that's going to be kind of working its way in this direction. It may be springing back some clouds into portions of New England and the northern portions of the mid-Atlantic, so that may keep temperatures down just a tad, but for the most part, no precip with that storm. But then, no problems after that storm completely exits, because now we're starting to see a huge outbreak of 60s, 70s, and 80s going all across basically the whole eastern half of the country, while the northwestern sections of the country are starting to cool off, where we're starting to see some 40s and 50s for highs, while the eastern sections of the country, look at that. I mean, you can see basically from Massachusetts down to Florida, basically we got 65 to 80 degree temperatures. So now we go into on our Monday the 8th. Warm conditions are still prevailing for a good portion of the country. I mean, we have 70s and 80s reaching as far north. We have 80s reaching as far north as southern Pennsylvania and southern Jersey. There are some areas into the Delmarva area and close to the DC area that could be nearing, if this verified, 85 degrees. That is some very warm conditions, and this is only early April. So this kind of gives you a good understanding. And these are overnight lows. I mean, look at these overnight low temperatures. Okay, look at this major 60 to 65 degree low through the central portions of the country. Look at these 50 degree lows in through the mid-Atlantic. Notice these 40 to 45 degree lows into southern New England, and notice these 45 to 50 degree lows into northern portions of the mid-Atlantic. That is some warm stuff for April. I mean, this is some very warm air, and notice how the cold air is building in the west. So what this is starting to tell me is that we have a very interesting, very warm pattern that is going to start establishing itself very, very soon here, by next weekend. So here we go. Here is our temperatures here from the GFS, and basically it shows the same exact story. We get a brief reprieve from the warmth for basically only 2 days. Next Tuesday and next Wednesday, we get a little bit of a reprieve. And as this is happening in the Northeast, we're also seeing a little bit of a reprieve in the South as well, as we get this little surface reflection that's going to be moving through. Some of these folks could be dealing with a few severe storms, especially along the Gulf Coast, where we're going to have some warmer conditions and where we have a flow off the water. But once you start going a little bit more to the north, you see only these 45, 50, maybe 55 degree temperatures. Okay, and that's really where we have more a stable air mass. But once you go closer to the coast, you have 60 to 65, maybe even 70 degree temperatures. Now, we're really concerned about Florida, because basically Florida is going to be a prime target for severe weather, because they're going to be sticking those they're going to really be holding on to that those very warm temperatures, while they're going to be having a very intense batch of precip moving through. This is a very strong concern for possible severe weather, especially once you're going in through a good chunk of Florida. So next Thursday, or this upcoming Thursday, we're going to have to really watch for the potentials of severe weather down there into Florida. But again, once you go into portions of Alabama, going into portions of South Carolina, some places may not even be getting out of the lower 40s, maybe even into central portions of Georgia. The GFS is only showing 35 to 40 degree temperatures. That is pretty damn cold. Excuse my language, but that is cold stuff. Well, in the meantime, up into the northeast, we are basically seeing near average conditions, 50 to 55 degree temperatures, some areas nearing 60 degrees, but for the most part, near average conditions. Now, once we get ourselves on into Friday, look at this. I mean, even still, where we're getting the rains, it's pretty cold. 30 to 35 degree temperatures into south central Virginia, northern portions of North Carolina. This is not cold enough for snow, but it's cold for highs in early April. I mean, it's pretty cold. We're almost 10 degrees warmer, maybe even close to 20 degrees warmer into southern New England. And look at this little batch of warmth into southern Pennsylvania, where there could be some areas nearing 70 degrees. But we'll have to see about that. But again, you can see here is this major wall of warmth that is basically eyeing the northeast. And again, it's this wall of warmth that is going to basically release itself into the northeast by the time we reach next weekend. Okay, and just notice how it starts coming in. Whoops. Notice how it starts coming in here. All right, we're already talking about widespread 60 to 70 degree temperatures overspread in Pennsylvania, Virginia. The south is starting to get now into the 85 degree temperature range, 75 to 85. I mean, look at Texas. I mean, these folks are seeing over 100 degree temperatures out there. I mean, this is some warm stuff. I mean, portions of Nebraska, Kansas, 90 to 95 degree temperatures into these sections. I mean, some of these folks just got over a major snowstorm just about a month ago. So this is some pretty intense stuff. And then now we're starting to go on into the 7th of April. And just look at this these warm conditions starting to work its way northeastward. I mean, all of Pennsylvania, New England, Virginia, 60 to 70 degree temperatures. I mean, this is the coldest air we can find is into portions of the northern plains and also the extreme coastal regions of the northwest. That's the coldest air we can find. Even extreme northern Maine and New England, 50s. That is still pretty warm for those folks. So now we go on into, now we're kind of going pretty far range out now, but even still this shows that the warm air is going to continue, okay? Notice how we have 75 to 80 degree temperatures reaching as far north as Massachusetts. We have 85 degree temperatures prevalent in Texas and Kansas. And just look at this. I mean, warm conditions. It just continues. Okay? I mean, this pattern of warm conditions is not going to release itself. And you can see that basically the whole entire country is going to be warm. I want you to notice something. I mean, this is pretty ridiculous. Where was it? Where did I see that? Was it here? Yeah, it was here. Hour 3:12. Look at these temperatures into portions of Arizona. I mean, look at this. This is like 110 to 120 degrees. Look at portions of coastal California. They could be reaching over 90 degrees for these guys. Look at portions of Kansas and Colorado getting up to 90 to 95 degrees. This is some intense warmth. I mean, we're talking almost summertime warmth here coming into portions of the country. I mean, look at this outbreak of warmth that goes as far north as Vermont, 60 to 65. We have 70 to 75 degree temperatures covering basically all of the mid-Atlantic. I mean, this is some serious stuff. And then now, look at the 14th of April. Just look at this. I mean, we have 80 to 85 degree temperatures reaching through Texas, through all of Alabama, basically, through a good chunk of Georgia, coming up through Virginia and into portions of Pennsylvania. 80 to 85 with 85 to 90 degree temperatures potentially into portions of West Virginia and Virginia. This is some real warmth. And then you talk about this, and then just look at that. I mean, we see these 80s going as far north as southern New England and even northern New England getting up into the 60s, maybe even nearing 70 degrees. This is some serious, serious warmth. So what does that mean? We're going to be getting into a very warm pattern very fast. So we're basically going to go from winter to summer. There's going to be basically a very small period in there where you're going to be talking about some springtime temperatures. But to me, what it looks like right now is this upcoming spring and summer is going to be very warm and very hot for many people. So that's what it looks like to me right now. Could I be wrong? Yeah. And could this change? Absolutely. But for the most part, I think a good chunk of the country is going to be above average this spring and this upcoming summer. So that's what it looks like, and we'll give you an update tomorrow. But I hope you all have a great rest of your Saturday, and take care, everyone.